This is AM Agenda. With me now, Liberal frontbencher Senator Scott Bryan and Labor MP Michelle Rowland. Michelle Rowland, first to you. You heard what Richard Marles had to say there. He says you've got to choose your fights carefully in opposition, recognise Tony Abbott won and also respect the mandate. He seems to be agreeing pretty strongly there with Nick Champion's argument. That's on the carbon tax, that is.
Yes, I understand. Look, as Kevin Rudd said when he was first elected, climate change is the great moral challenge of our time. I don't think it's ceased to be a great moral challenge of our time. And I think it's a salient lesson that when Labor was seen to be walking away from that in early 2010, I wasn't in Parliament, I was a candidate, that we suffered badly in opinion polls. The public took a bad view of us. I'm quite unequivocal about the fact that direct action is a bad policy. This is a policy that subsidises polluters. This is a policy that will cost households $1,300 a year. This is a policy that's not even costed. This is a policy which doesn't have a single economist or credible scientist backing it. This is a policy where not only members of the Conservatives can't even explain it, including Nick Champion's opponent in the election, can't even explain it and articulate it, and yet they expect the Australian public, they expect the Parliament to vote for it.
Well, if that's the case, why not do what Nick Champion and Richard Marles seem to be alluding to there? And Nick Champion argued it last night that if it is a dog of a policy, why not let them implement it, expose it when it's in operation? Why
should I expose the people of Greenway, who elected me to represent them, to $1,300 a year? Why should I expose them to extra costs in place of a policy that is already resulting in reduced emissions, a policy that hasn't had the unimaginable consequences that were predicted on inflation? I'm not going to do the wrong thing by the people who elected me. But Tony Abbott won the election. Tony Abbott won the election and campaigned on this for many years, not just 6 weeks. As his own side has shown, it's an absolute fig leaf, according to Malcolm Turnbull. He knows it is. They can't even find one person to explain what it is, other than planting trees and magic soil. You know, I'm not voting for a policy about magic trees and, planting trees and magic soil. Look, I believe in markets. I believe in markets, and this is a market-based mechanism that we have put in place. And I would have thought the Liberal Party would support markets. And sorry, before I go any further, congratulations, Senator Ryan, for being a member of the Abbott government. I should have said that at the start. My sincere congratulations.
Let's go to Senator Ryan now. Then you've heard what Michelle Rowland had to say. Also, Richard Marles this morning, who seems to disagree with Michelle. There is a bit of a debate within Labor as to what to do on the carbon tax, but it looks like there might be some momentum towards at least not getting in the way of the coalition's plans on repealing it.
Well, Kieran, Labor introduced a carbon tax when they promised they wouldn't. And now we've got people like Michelle and others saying that they don't want to listen to the people when they've voted for its repeal. There was no more central issue to this campaign than Labor's broken promise on the carbon tax and our promise to remove it, to take pressure off household bills and to take pressure off manufacturing jobs and power prices in Australia, all of which the carbon tax makes worse. Now, Nick Champion has blown the whistle here, and Richard Marles earlier this morning was sort of having a bet each way. I mean, Labor's confronted with a choice. Do they listen to the people and the clear majority that voted for the repeal of the carbon tax, or are they going to put their head in the sands and do what they did in the last term, which is to try and do exactly what people voted against?
Let's move on. I want to look at Kevin Rudd's future now. Michelle Rowland, is it counterproductive for your colleagues to be calling on him to leave? Does he need the space that Richard Marles suggested he does to make a decision?
Kieran, I was re-elected on Saturday when everyone, including just about every commentator on this show, said I wouldn't, and I'm incredibly humbled by that. It is not the place for me, a humble backbencher who got re-elected when no one said she was going to tell a former Prime Minister of Australia what to do. He can do whatever he likes.
Senator Bryan, on the Abbott front bench, he's working on that as we speak. Apparently Bronwyn Bishop, according to Phil Coorey's report in the Financial Review, is going to be offered the speakership. The question is, will she take it? She still wants the cabinet, doesn't she?
Well, firstly, Kieran, I'm in the Senate. I'm not going to comment on House matters. But look, Tony Abbott's got down methodically to building a government, to doing important things like establishing contact with the President of Indonesia. These these are a matter for the Prime Minister, and he's indicated that he'll make an announcement early next week. But all our front benches have made a contribution to earning the trust of the Australian people at last weekend at the last election. And you know, I know that all my front bench colleagues and parliamentary colleagues worked very hard, but this is a matter for the Prime Minister that he's turning his mind to. Will make an announcement about next week.
I know some senior Liberals, very senior Liberals, believe that now's the time to make some tough decisions, to have some renewal early in the term. You'd probably support that, wouldn't you, as one of the young up-and-comers?
Look, Kieran, I've always been very humbled by the opportunity first to be a member of the Parliament and then a junior member of the front bench. And one of the things I think is very important about this new administration is the fact that we do have a lot of experienced hands, and we do have people like myself have the opportunity to learn from. The problem with the last Labor government was that so many people wouldn't serve under the Prime Minister of one variety or another. The fact that we have such a surplus of talent, that we have new arrivals like Christian Porter with experience and an opportunity to make a contribution, and so many people who have made a contribution and who have experience, I think is a great blend of talent.
Okay. Now, as Scott Ryan said there, Michelle Rowland, Prime Minister-elect Abbott has had talks on the phone last night with SBY, the Indonesian president, who's not only invited Mr Abbott to attend the APEC summit next month, but also it looks like there'll be earlier talks on border protection over the next week or two, with a visit by Mr Abbott earlier than the APEC summit itself. So far from conflict, it looks like there's pretty good cooperation in the early stages of the incoming Abbott government.
Oh, and there should be, because there's a lot to do. He's going to be very busy with this issue. He's got to negotiate the whole turning boats around when SBY flatly rejected it last time and wasn't even raised with him when Mr Abbott got to talk to him when he was in opposition. But look, now he's the Prime Minister. He's having that discussion with him. Look, he's got a lot of boats to buy. He's got a 3-star general to appoint. So he's going to be very busy in this policy area.
Now, let's look to the front bench again, or at least those who would be on your front bench, Senator Ryan. Arthur Sinodinos, will he survive in the Senate? It looks like it's going to be close there in New South Wales. And also Sophie Mirabella, what's the latest you're hearing in the seat of Indi?
Well, there's a few thousand votes to count today, I think 5,000 or 6,000, mainly postals and provisional votes, and Sophie Mirabella is a few hundred votes behind. The truth is that what we saw in Indi was an extraordinary campaign by outsiders. There were unions up there handing out leaflets on election day. Get Up was involved in the campaign and had paid advertisements, and there were people bussed in from Melbourne. So it's a close seat, but I know the locals are optimistic that they'll be able to claw that back.
And what about your colleague in the Senate, Senator Sinodinos?
Look, I'm not as aware of what's happening in New South Wales. I have had a quick look, and I know in New South Wales, while they think it's close, they are confident Arthur will get re-elected. Importantly, of course, the Senate doesn't change until 1 July next year, and so Arthur would remain a senator until, at the very least, June 30 next year, regardless of the result. But New South Wales Liberals are quite quietly confident that Arthur will be re-elected.
And finally, Michelle Rowland, you did buck the trend in New South Wales and indeed nationally. How much do you put that down to the problems of your opponent, James Diaz?
Well, I'd like to remind you, Kieran, that on the day my opponent was at $1.10 and I had completely blown out, and I was doing a lot of live-to-air crosses on the day with reporters telling me Tony Abbott is campaigning in the seats of Kingsford Smith and Barton with much higher margins than myself. When you're on a margin of 0.88%, you need to make sure that you work for 3 years, and the campaign that we ran in Greenway with the support of so many volunteers was predicated on the basis of me being an effective local member for 3 years. So I put it down. I'm so humbled and I'm so grateful to the people of Greenway for re-electing me against everything that not only the odds but all the pundits said.
Michelle Rowland, thank you. Congratulations on that, and also Scott Ryan with the election of the coalition. Thanks very much. Both. We'll take a quick break on AM Agenda when we